Welcome in, guys. It is Brad with College Sportscast. I've got Hammonds here with me, and we are here to do our weekly Big
Can I
Flush
please
show.
have your attention?
There's all a commotion around here.
What are you talking about?
Let them yap at you.
It's actually very exciting.
What is up, guys? It's the Big Flush show with College Sportscast.
I know something else. That's actually.
What's up?
I said I know something else that's actually exciting. Oh goodness. Oh good. Oh me.
All right, guys, we are here. It is Wednesday night, November the 13th, and we are here to do our week 12 of season 3, the Big Fuss Show. And I've got Hammonds here with me tonight. We were just having a little bit of fun here before the show come on because I was busy trying to get the show ready, and Hammonds informs me that Arkansas is down at halftime to Troy, 27-26. So we were just having a little laugh here. That's the reason why we're a little crazy. But Hammonds, he's the one that told me it was happening. I didn't even know it was happening. You ain't got nothing to say about it?
I mean, you know.
All right.
Hey,
All right.
Here's my thing,
welcome
Brad.
to College Sportscast.
I'm glad it's not my problem anymore. That's all I'll say. I'm just glad that's not our problem anymore. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. 1,000%. That's all I got to say.
Yeah.
Welcome to College Sportscast.
Hey,
you can help support us by sending stars, or you can subscribe to our page, and it's only 99 cents a month, and we would appreciate that. That does help us to earn money to continue to make more content for you guys. What's up, Jerry?
So I got a bone to pick
I
with
appreciate
Jerry.
you being here with us.
I got a bone to pick with Jerry. I posted something the other day, and he wrote underneath it, "Go 49ers." We don't allow that on my page, just so we know. Just so we know.
Jeremy's with us. What's up, Jeremy?
What's up, Jeremy?
Wildcat Country on Facebook. You might know him from there. Yeah. So, all right, guys, we're here to do the Big Fuss Show. I do want to start off with something about Kentucky here real quick. Today, the women's team got a big 5-star commitment. And just off the top of the show here, I do want to make a mention of that. Caitlin Kerr is a 5-star kid, including South Carolina, Ohio State. Lots of big teams were after her. And she committed to Kenny Brooks in Kentucky. And John, this Kentucky team for years down the road is looking pretty good. I mean, they got Dominique Porova that's going to be back. They got Lexi Blue. They got Clara Silva that's a freshman. They got Claire Carroll coming in.
Yeah.
When you put all these pieces together for the future, I'm talking, 2 or 3 years down the road, this team is looking really good with young players.
It's looking really bright. I was telling somebody today, the way Pope is recruited with Jasper Johnson and Malachi Marino, and now you got Carroll committing to Brooks. Like I think people forget to really mention that Kentucky basketball is in good hands, and I'm sure Brooks. Georgia Moore will be gone next year. I'm sure she'll have a really good WNBA career. She'll get drafted pretty high. And I think when it's all said and done, I think Kenny Brooks will go back through the portal again. I think he'll get some guards like he did this year with Deja Lawrence, Georgia Moore, the big girl Clara Strack. I think you'll see him go through the portal and work that way through some different back channels, but I think recruiting at Kentucky hasn't been the best probably since 2020, probably since we had Matthew Mitchell. And even then we was getting really good top girls, top recruits. We had some really big recruits come in here, and a few of them has went to the WNBA, a few of them has went overseas. And I think getting that back to Kentucky basketball is a plus for the women's side. Everybody talks about the men. Everybody talks about Mark Pope, what he's doing, but people forget about what the women's side is doing. Like you said the other day, the women's game is evolving every day. It's getting bigger every day. There's games on every week, just like the men. And there's a lot of people that, some people cover it, but there's not a lot of coverage on it beyond those that really watch it on a consistent basis. Like you go cover it. Some of the AP writers, you don't see a lot of the men's side writing about the women unless it's a need. I think we need more people in the media to cover women's basketball because of the way it's evolving and forming. And I think you got that with Talia Goodman, Jeff Goodman's daughter. She's bringing a really big thing to on sports.
Yeah.
She's doing a really good thing with that because I think she's working her way up to the top, and I think she's a really big plus to get that ball rolling. And just seeing the women game evolve is exciting for me.
Yeah, I mean, all of that's great, and the women's game does need a little more coverage as far as media coverage, but the popularity of the game is probably at an all-time high. And beyond that, just talking about this girl can shoot the three. She is one of the better players in this 2025 class. Kaylin Carroll is her name. She's from Massachusetts, and she is a special, special player. You put her with Lexi Strack and Dom Porova, that's not playing right now, that's injured. She has 3 years remaining. You put these players together that's got 3 and 4 years left remaining. Hats off to Kenny Brooks. When you think of the women's game on a national level, you don't necessarily think that Kentucky is going to get a top 15 recruit. And here you go today. He gets a big commitment. So hats off to Kenny Brooks.
And to add to that, she was even looking at South Carolina. So Kentucky got a really good recruit out of this. This is not just any kind of recruit. Like, this is a girl that is being recruited by some of the best colleges in the country, South Carolina, North Carolina. So Kenny Brooks, congrats to picking up that pledge, and hopefully she'll add to the future for next year.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, John, we are going to move on.
You're breaking up.
We're going to start like we did last week. All right. I said we're going to start with the college football playoff rankings.
Yep.
You got me now?
Yeah, I hear you now. Yeah, it just broke up a little bit.
All right. All right. And we're going to, and at 25, as soon as I get this thing to come up, is Tulane. Tulane sneaks in the cup. Tulane sneaks in the top 25, John. They are 8-2.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, John Summerall's there. And it seems like wherever he goes, they wind up, 10-2, 11-1. Seems like wherever he goes, he's in his first year at Tulane, and he gets in the college football playoff rankings in the second week. Army's 24. Army's still 9-0. 23 is Missouri at 7-2. 22 is LSU, 6-3. South Carolina is 21 at 6-3. Clemson finds themselves at 20, and they are 7-2. Louisville finds themselves at 19, and they are 6-3. They are the highest three-loss team at 19. Washington State is 18 at 8-1. Colorado is 17 at 7-2. Kansas State is 16 at 7-2, and Texas A&M is at 15, and they are 7-2 as well. The top 14, John, I'm going to let you kind of run through those on the top 14.
14 was hold on a minute. You'll have to do it because I ain't got it pulled up. I thought I had it pulled up.
Okay. All right. Well, number 14, SMU.
SMU was 14 now.
What's up, Shane? SMU is 14, and they're at 8-1. They actually dropped somehow in this one, which makes no sense to me whatsoever. I thought they were too low last week. 13 is Boise State. They dropped as well. They were 12 last week. They won a game over the weekend. They are 8-1. Both of those teams are. Georgia comes in at 12. 7-2. Ole Miss is 11 at 8-2. Alabama is 10 at 7-2. Miami, who lost this weekend, is at number 9. They are 9-1. Notre Dame is 8 at 8-1. Tennessee is number 7 at 8-1. BYU moves up to number 6, 10-0. Penn State 8-1 is 4. Texas is 3 at 8.
You're breaking up really bad, Brad.
Ohio State is number 2 at 8-1, and Oregon is number 1 at 10-0. Yeah, I don't know what's going on, so I'm not sure how to fix that after the show's already started, to be honest with you. John, where's the problems? Who do you think is too high in this poll?
Well,
in these
I
rankings?
I thought that Penn State should not be over Indiana. I mean, what is Penn State's best win? You look at the resumes and you could probably put Indiana over them. The other one was Arkansas. Arkansas. I got Arkansas on the brain tonight. Miami and Georgia, which I thought, with Arkansas. Lord, John, get it together. Miami didn't, I know they lost one game. They only lost one game, and I felt like Georgia had 2. But who is Miami really play? Like, I feel like, and I know this is going to be a big hot take, but I feel like SMU should be over Miami just for the mere fact that they're undefeated in the ACC. But I get where the voters are putting Miami. I get that, but then again, and I understand the Georgia one too because they've lost two, and the way they lost on the road was another thing to Ole Miss, which I get why Miami's in front of them, but man,
but Georgia also has the toughest schedule in the country.
They do. That's true. They do. And I just think
Georgia also has the toughest schedule in the country, strength of schedule.
They do. And I don't know. I feel like we're going to get down to this little issue, and it's going to come down to somebody is going to get left out that shouldn't get left out, and I think it's going to be screwed up. Somebody's going to do something that they shouldn't vote for or vote against, and I think it's just going to ruin college like it does normally with the 14. But what do you do in that instance? I mean, you're still giving an opportunity for 12 teams to be in there. So I'm not so sure, and that's like Jerry said. He says he thinks 4 teams will get in there. I'm not so sure. I think they might get 3 at the most. If Georgia don't win out, they're not going. That's just all there is to it. Georgia's going to have to.
They definitely got to beat Tennessee this weekend.
Yeah, they're going to have to beat Tennessee to get in, or at least keep their hopes alive. The team that really benefited all of this was Ole Miss. If you look at Ole Miss's schedule, it really opened the door for Ole Miss, and I think now that Ole Miss is in that top frame, Ole Miss has a really big opportunity to make their presence felt. And then I'll let you go on. That was, but my too high was Penn State. I feel like Penn State should be lower than Indiana. I know that everybody's going to think, well, who has Indiana played? Well, who has Penn State played? Because Indiana has beaten probably the same amount of teams that Penn State has, and yet they're still behind them. And I just don't agree with that.
And Indiana is 10-0, and Penn State is 8-1.
Yeah, that's my biggest gripe. That's my biggest gripe out of all this.
So I mean, I get you on that, but there's a few things. I mean, there's so much wrong with this poll, to be honest with you. I mean, with this ranking, it's not even a poll. It's a ranking by a 13-member committee is what this is. That is supposed to be trying to get the best teams in the college football playoff. Well, if that's the case, first of all, Texas has 0 wins versus top 25. Who's Texas' best win? Vanderbilt?
Oh, yeah, possibly.
I mean, I'm being honest with you. Penn State, way too high. Indiana and BYU should definitely be. I mean, they got them 5 and 6. They did move up 3 spots in this one. SMU being 14 and then being the only undefeated team in the ACC, and you put Miami, who just took a loss, above them 5 spots?
Yeah,
this is insane. I mean, that's just insane.
Well, let's look at it here. I got in. Let me get up Indiana's schedule. So Indiana has beaten. Let's see here. They beat Florida International. They beat Western Illinois. They beat UCLA. They beat Charlotte. They beat Maryland. They beat Northwestern, Nebraska, Washington, Michigan State, and Michigan. Well, let's pull up Penn State's schedule. This is going to be interesting because I looked at this, and this is what's got me. So they beat West Virginia, beat Bowling Green, barely beat Bowling Green, Kent State, Illinois, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, lost to Ohio State, and beat Washington. You're telling me that Indiana's schedule is about the same as theirs, and Penn State is ahead of them? Because
it doesn't make any sense.
It's basically the same schedule except for USC. And USC is in a down.
And USC is 4-5. They're 4-5.
Yeah. Like here's where my take.
And Jonathan Garrison's over here, and I've heard this argument. Well, it's going to work itself out because the ACC champion's going to get in anyway, and it's going to work itself out. Well, that's not the purpose of these rankings, of these committee putting out a ranking each week. It is supposed to be a snapshot of what is going on right now, this week. After week 11, heading into week 12, it's supposed to be a snapshot of what is going on in the college football landscape right now. Well, right now, SMU is way better off than Miami. Miami should not be there. Why have these rankings? Why put these rankings out if you're just going to wait for the champion? That makes no sense.
Here's another.
Hell, you could say that about any season in any time.
Here's another thing that really gets me is I know you play who you play, and your schedule is your schedule. But you see these teams like Penn State, you see these teams above, they do all this greatness in the regular season. I call them regular season champions, great regular season teams. And then they get into the, playoffs and there's no competitiveness from them. Like, it's like they don't even compete. It's like the cut, like Miami. Like, who's Miami really going to match up with and beat in this playoff when it comes down to it? Like, we know that they're
How does Miami out of the ACC lead in these rankings for the ACC and technically getting the fourth seed out of this? If it was set like this, Miami would get the fourth seed for the ACC championship.
And I've always said.
But wait a second. How do they get the fourth seed ACC when they don't even lead the ACC? They're not even leading the conference.
Yeah, that's
insane.
That's what my issue with it was. It's sort of like 2 years ago. TCU makes a big run. They get to the national championship and they get exposed by Georgia. And Jonathan Garrison just said that. So that's how I feel it is.
Yeah.
You get all these teams, they whip up on these other teams, and then when they get to the big show, they're not competitive. And I'm not saying that you're not deserving of that bid or that berth, but but if you're really not leading your conference, I think it should go to a team that's actually leading that conference instead of a team that is not leading that, like Miami, SMU. That's the biggest gripe I have. Is like you have a team.
I don't get why do we have these rankings? Why do we have these rankings come out late in the season like this each week if we're just going to wait and see what happens? It's going to work itself out.
Look at SMU. Look at SMU's resume compared to Miami's. Like, it's night and day. Like, they beat Louisville on the road.
They have top 25 wins.
Yeah, they do. And
2 of them.
To me, it should be.
And a 3-point loss at BYU.
Let's not forget that one.
It's not bad. I mean, they're undefeated.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, Brad.
Compare the losses. Matter of fact, let's compare Miami and SMU's loss. Let's do that for just a second. I mean, it's not even close. It's night and day.
Well, here's SMU has beaten Duke in overtime. They lost 3 to BYU. Let's see. They beat Pittsburgh, which is a top 25 team. Pittsburgh's in the top 25. And beyond that, that's all they're getting. They beat Louisville. And the last 3 games, they play Boston College, Virginia, and California, which neither 3 of those teams are in the top 25. But still, I think you have to still look at what SMU, their body of work, compared to what Miami's done, because what has Miami really done? I mean, because if you look at Miami's schedule, let's see. I got to look it up here.
They barely survived at California. That's a team that's about a 500 team, 4-5, 5-4.
They beat Florida A&M. They barely beat Virginia Tech. That they was saved by a Hail Mary call. They barely beat Cal. They did beat Louisville on the road. They beat Florida State. Now they beat Duke. They lost to Georgia Tech. Now you're telling me a team loses to Georgia Tech, and yet the ACC team is still undefeated in SMU?
Compared to losing to an undefeated BYU at their house?
Yeah,
by 3?
That's why I have a problem with some of these. That's why I've always said I have an issue with the NCAA tournament committee. I'm not against adding 72, 76 teams, but it's all about who you beat. And if it's not who you're beating, then what's the point of doing these rankings every week? Like if you beat a certain teams, like
it's just like, let's take Georgia. How does Georgia fall out of the top 12? Miami stay in, and Georgia has the toughest strength of schedule in the country.
Well, I'll give you the reason for Georgia, I think, was how they played against Ole Miss. That had a lot to do with it, because they look at how you play on the road, they look at all different sides of it. And I think it's how they lost to Ole Miss is why I think they was out. But here's the thing, Georgia, if you want to redeem yourself, if you beat Tennessee this weekend, you're possibly back in the hunt. You're probably back in the top 12.
They will be. They'll be back in there if they beat Tennessee.
Yeah. So, Brad, here's my
a low team, and then they close the season out with Virginia or with Georgia Tech.
They play UMass, and they play Georgia Tech. See, here's the thing.
Yeah.
We could sit and discuss this all night, and we could have different scenarios of why this team, why Team A didn't beat Team Y or Team B didn't beat Team A. But at the end of the day, this is how they do things. And I'm not so sure that it's even going to fix anything, even if we do this 12-man playoff, because there's still going to be somebody that's going to be left out, and there's going to be question marks. We're going to have another.
So let's take a look at some of the teams that could be left out that I think should still have a legitimate shot of getting in. Okay. So, I mean, you've got SMU, which we have clearly talked about. Boise is sitting at 13 and barely hanging on to that 12th spot in the actual playoff. They dropped, despite a decent win this past weekend, from 12 to 13, which makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Okay. A&M who is tied for the lead in the SEC, is sitting at 15. Then you got Kansas State and Colorado. Colorado actually, if they win out, they control their destiny, to be honest. Colorado does now.
Speaking of Colorado, let me say, we're talking about too low. If Colorado somehow wins these next 3 games, and they get to the Big 12 championship and they win it, Deion might get into the playoff.
They're in if they win.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
They might. If he wins the Big 12 championship, he's in.
I mean,
they control their destiny. So
they do.
Here's the big story. What if they went out and get to the Big 12 championship and then lose the Big 12 championship and have 3 losses? Does this silly committee who puts so much into brand and everything else, does this committee put him in with 3 losses just because he's Deion Sanders?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I'm not so sure that they won't. If you look at what they've done here, I'm not so sure that they won't, which I think is dumb, but I'm not so sure that they won't, to be honest with you. Now, here's another team. Washington State is sitting at 18. They only have 1 loss. They are likely, if you look at their schedule, John, they are likely to be 11-1.
Yeah, but they're going to have to leapfrog about 5 or 6 teams. And the schedule they play is not exactly.
Depends on what happens in front of them. But does that mean that some of these 2 and 3 loss teams that loses conference championship games, do they get in over an 11-1 Washington State team? Let's say Texas A&M or Ole Miss, who's in right now. They have 2 losses. They get to an SEC championship game and lose. Does Ole Miss get in with 3 losses over 11-1 Washington State team?
I think they do, just for the mere fact of their wins. Like Georgia, a lot of these, I know everybody says, well, they're in the Mountain West, like with the Mountain West. I think they're playing with the Mountain West this year. I think Washington State is. If you look at the schedules, the committee is going to look at who have you beaten. And I think that's where Washington State is probably going to lose out, because now they did beat Washington.
For me, I'm just saying, for me, though, I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think it's right to leave out an 11-1 Washington State team and put in a 3-loss Big Ten, 3-loss SEC.
Well,
3-loss.
We had this same discussion with FSU last year. The schedule they played, the teams they beat, and then boom, they was left out, and you see where they ended up. A carnage.
Yeah, but that was a 4. That was only 4 teams that got in there.
Yeah,
and one of them had to be left out. This is different. This is putting in a 3-loss team into 12 when you have spots and you can put in a 1-loss team that probably deserves to be there. Now, are they gonna have a chance to win? I don't know. Georgia could do the same thing. Georgia could win out, maybe get to the SEC championship game and lose and have 3 losses. And I mean, I'm sorry, but let's look at Indiana for a second. They're sitting at 5, okay? Let's just say that Ohio State beats them and they finish the season 11-1. Are you really going to sit here and say there's not a chance they won't be left out? Because I think there will be.
Yeah.
Does a 3-loss SEC team get in over 11-1 Indiana after a 10-0 start and set at number 5?
I think
because that's a real legitimate question.
Yeah, I think they do.
That's a legitimate question
in that regard.
And you know I'm right.
Yeah, it is.
I mean, because they're setting at 10-0. They play Ohio State in a couple of weeks. They got a bye week this week.
They're off this week. Yep. So,
yeah,
that's a real good question there.
So those are some of the questions I have with this committee. That's why I say Indiana deserves to be higher, because where they are in this season. You got to reward these teams for being. If Indiana finishes 11-1, I don't care that Ole Miss or Georgia or whoever.
Here's another aspect of this, Brad. Is I've heard teams say, "Well, you're rewarding teams, and then they're getting whipped in the college football playoff." Well, you got to reward their regular season accomplishments. If they end up 11-0 and they beat Ohio State, and then they get to the college football playoff and they lose.
Look, that's what the first round of this college football playoff is for. Then you get it down to the 8, and then you have good games, and you play those good games, and you finish your quarterfinals, your semifinals, and your finals. Now that it's 12 teams, that's what the 12 teams and those opening rounds is for, is to give some of these teams that deserve it. Now, if there is a whole gaggle of teams that are sitting at 2 and 3 losses, that's fine. But if you've got 11-1 Indiana and 11-1 Washington State, and you've got 11-1 teams or 12-0 teams, and you're not letting them in the playoff for that opening round, my personal opinion, that's wrong. I'm not. You're not going to get a bunch of those, but you might get a couple of them. There might be a couple of them that finish like that,
and there might be one that you wouldn't think would get or lose in the college football playoff, and they had a great regular season. They get in there and they actually go to the championship. We've seen that with TCU.
Yeah,
they beat Michigan, which Michigan was a really good team. Yep. I felt like that year Michigan was probably the only team that could probably compete with Georgia, and TCU went in and they won that game. So
yeah, they did.
I mean, it's all about that one game 100%. Chance. But I've always said you have to reward teams for their regular season, even though with their schedule, and if they're ranked high, you have to reward those teams with an opportunity to play, because if you don't, you might as well just take this whole college football playoff and rip it apart, because you're just going to destroy it as it is. So,
like I said, that's what the opening round is for, if you ask me. I mean, and I'm not saying you let all of them in or whatever. I mean, most of the time you're only going to have 1 or 2 of these teams that are at 0 or 1 loss, and that kind of stuff. Just like I'm talking about with Indiana, they're 10-0. It could happen. They lose to Ohio State, win the next week. They're 11-1. They don't make the Big Ten championship game because Oregon's undefeated, and they lose to Ohio State, and they only got the 1 loss. So it's Oregon, Ohio State. Indiana doesn't make it. They're sitting at 11-1. I'm sorry, but they deserve to be in over a 3-loss SEC team. Playing, and even if that 3rd loss is in the SEC championship, Alabama, Georgia, Ole Miss. Just saying. All right, I'm trying to go back and look at these with Jonathan and Jerry because I know some people are not going to agree with me on that, but to me, it's pretty simple. I agree with you on that. And right now, the cold weather teams kind of have the lead for that home game. Ohio State, Indiana, Penn State.
It's an edge for
up
those.
There that has the lead.
You know, Greg McElroy brought out a good point yesterday when they was discussing this. He said teams that are in the colder weather area, like Indiana, the northern teams, he said they would have an edge against these teams that are not used to that kind of weather. And I think that comes into play when you do these playoffs. You know, he said, could you imagine going to Bloomington on December 21st and it pouring the snow for Alabama?
If you're Alabama,
like it changes the complexion of the edge matchup when it comes to the weather side of things.
So, Jerry, like I said, I get it. I know some people are not going to agree with me when it comes to that, but there is a very likely scenario that Indiana is sitting at 11-1 and not in the Big Ten championship game. And some of these 2-loss SEC teams who might lose in the SEC championship, and they have 3 losses, and who gets in and who's not. There is a very likely scenario that happens right now.
Yeah.
And I put Washington State in there too, because they could be 11-1 as well. So, you know, there's a couple of teams there that I think that could happen to. And that's the reason why I was talking about it here on the Big Fuss, because that's what we are. I'm trying to fuss and say what I think is actually right. So, you know, that's what we do here, the Big Fuss. All right, John, we're going to switch it up, and I'm going to go to college basketball. Of course, last night, the Champions Classic happened last night. We did do a show where Kentucky beat Duke late last night in the Champions Classic, and it was a fun night. I think Kentucky fans were you know, in need of, to be quite honest with you, a blue blood win like that. It seems like it's been a long time that Kentucky has had a blue blood win like that, especially early in the season in one of these. We did go to Kansas in 2022 and kind of beat the crap out of them in the Fog or at the Fog in 2022. Outside of that, beating some of these blue bloods, I can't remember the last time in 5 years, we played Gonzaga 2 years in a row. We can't beat Gonzaga. We can't beat UConn. Every time we play UConn, we get beat.
I'll say this about that comment. You know, everybody, you know, like last night, somebody said, well, we have beaten those teams. I said, yeah, but the energy level right out of the gate, we've not been able to, the first game, that Champions Classic, we haven't won the Champions Classic since 2020. We've struggled in that game. And then one year we won it, and then we went in, and then we lost to Evansville. It's the little things like that it feels different, because you're winning the games that you feel like you should win and give that energy and vibe with. You know, I was sitting with my mom last night and we was watching the game, and I said, when was the last time we went down this rabbit hole or this late in the game and just closed the game and it go for us instead of the other side? I think you mentioned that with your with some of your family. you said, when was the last time we actually won one of these games where it come down to the last 2 minutes and it seems like everything was against us and we never could pull it out? And last night we did. It just felt like there was a different vibe around this team, the way they play, Pope. My biggest difference in this game was the halftime adjustments. Pope went in, changed some things up. He put Andrew Carr at the 5. He matched him up on the block with Cooper Flagg at times. And the big boy, I can't think of his name, Mulak. I think that's how you say his name. The big boy, the one that was cramping up. And he went right at him. And then in the last minute, he switched up the rotations, and he was bringing in different guys. And I felt like you seen, like he ran circles around John Shire. Duke reminded me of a lot of Calipari teams last night, the last 5 minutes. Trying to play hero ball with 5 minutes to go with one player. And sometimes that works, and sometimes
with Cooper Flagg.
Yeah. And when you're playing against a guy like Cooper Flagg, and you're going up against a bunch of veterans and guys that have played in college for a long time, a lot of times you're going to lose because experience takes over that, over the freshman mistakes. And he had 2 bad turnovers that cost him the game.
Yeah.
And it just – Cooper Flagg will get better as time goes.
He played great.
To me, it seemed like for most of the game that Duke's talent was better than Kentucky's. But Kentucky's grit and physicality won out in the end, and I think that's why they won that game, because they wanted it more than Duke did at the end.
All right, so I'm going to give you a tidbit, John. I'm going to give everybody a little tidbit here. So Kentucky, their youngest starter last night, the youngest guy that started for Kentucky, is older than Duke's oldest starter out of the starting 5s. So Owe would probably be Kentucky's youngest starter.
Yeah.
He is older than Duke's oldest starter. So you're talking about experience. That's where experience comes in. Proctor is probably their oldest starter. He's a junior. I didn't look up all of them, but that's my guess. So I am going to move on from this game. John, I want to ask you a little bit, a night or two before last night. I want to ask you a little bit about the Houston and Auburn game that was played over the weekend. And I know you watched some of that game as well. Auburn looks really good. What do you think?
They do. They're physical. I watched the second half quite a bit, and it felt like they had gotten to figure out what Auburn was wanting to do. They went out to 9 points. They pushed it to a double-digit lead. To Hod Pettiford, he had he's a really good basketball player. He scored 15 points in the second half against Houston. The main thing that I love about Auburn is their defense. The way they grind. They held Houston to 41% shooting. Johnny Broome might be one of the best players in the SEC. I wouldn't go as far as say that he might be SEC Player of the Year, co-captain next to Mark Sears. Like he's that good. Bruce Pearl has been consistent at Auburn. He wins. They had a couple years there where they wasn't really great, and he took them all the way to the tournament, and he still got what he could out of. Pearl gets what he gets out of those kids. I always say that he gets the most out of all those kids, regardless if they're not that great. They're still always going to be a team that plays physical, plays defense. And when they're running their offense, they can run you out of the gym when they're hot. And which that's not to say that Houston's not going to be great either.
Really good.
Houston's going to have a great team too. They're going to be in the top 5 all year, top 10. So, but Auburn to me looks like the team next to Alabama is going to contend for the SEC championship. And now that we're talking about Kentucky beating Duke, I'm not so sure that Kentucky's not in that same category now. Them in Tennessee. So I think you're going to see those 4 and maybe a few others get behind them. Florida, Arkansas, those. SEC is going to be fun to watch this year. But I really enjoyed the Auburn game Saturday night. They're a lot of fun.
John, I wanted to ask you about Kansas. Kansas played North Carolina. I've learned is this team's a lot more
they're
deep.
They're a lot more experienced, I think. You got Hunter Dickinson. He's back. He had 28 points last night. To me, this game was personal for Hunter Dickinson because he willed them to win this game. After it being not as pretty in the first half, this game won't be put on a theater show anytime soon. It was ugly at times. The shooting in this game, but Michigan State to me, on the other side too, there's still a lot of pieces there. Jace Richardson, son of Jason Richardson. I'm getting old, by the way. When you talk about that, like he was on one of those Izzo teams that had Mateen Cleaves in that era. He's going to be a really good player. Fierce is going to be a good player. Xavier Booker. But last night to me was all about Hunter Dickinson. He's a really good player. He can shoot it outside. He can go in and out, and he can do a lot of things. And Zeke Mayo is a really good player. DeJuan Harris is a really good player. The thing about Harris, he's a really good defensive guy. Now, every now and then you'll have
AJ
Stores, and Rylan Griffin, the transfer from Alabama. He's really good. Looking at Michigan State, I'll say this real quick, and then I'll let you. You could really tell they miss Tyson Walker. They lack a lot of perimeter shooting. They don't have the perimeter shooting they had a year ago. A lot of people thought that Jaden Atkins and Jeremy Fears would take over for that backcourt, but they did not shoot well last night. Now, they got a transfer from Omaha, Frankie Fiddler. Frankie Fiddler is really, really good. He put some good moments together last night. But they shot 3 for 24 from three-point range. And I say that to say this with Michigan State. I think the Tom Izzo era, that's something I kind of wanted to bring up. I think it's getting ready to come to a close. If you've watched some of the games recently in the last couple of years, he just don't look like he kind of reminds me of Saban. Where you just get to the point to where it's just you've done what you've done, and just go out on top. And I don't know how he feels about the whole NIL, but it just seems like Michigan State used to get all the top recruits and all these top players, and now they're going everywhere else. It seems like Michigan State's not in the running for these guys anymore. And it just seems like they're more so going to the portal. And to me, I just don't see Michigan State being a top program like the Kansases, the Kentuckys, the now the UConns and the Creightons. It feels like Michigan State has kind of been left behind in the college basketball landscape. Do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they're where they used to be, but I'm not sure if Izzo's ready to hang it up or not. But I don't think that. But they did put up a pretty good fight last night.
They did.
I thought in that game last night, besides Hunter Dickinson, I don't really think either team played particularly well in that game last night. Of course, Kansas, I do think, has more weapons than they had last year, which is a good thing because last year that was their key.
Yeah, they didn't have anybody beyond Hunter Dickinson that could just go and get a basket. And I think now they got that, and I think it's going to help Dickinson. But I think also they just didn't really shoot the ball that well last night. Now they did play well against North Carolina. But you got to remember they was playing at the Fog. They weren't playing at a neutral court. So we'll find out about Kansas coming up. They play Duke coming up in a couple of weeks. They play Creighton. They play Arizona State. They play Cincinnati on the road, I think. So we'll find out where Kansas stands in a couple of weeks when they play Duke. I'm interested to see how Cooper Flagg and Hunter Dickinson what happens in that round one game. That's going to be because Hunter Dickinson likes to kind of shove it around.
Yeah, that should be a fun one.
And see what he, because Dickinson likes to run his mouth a little bit. Now I'm interested to see what Cooper Flagg does. Like I'm interested in seeing that matchup. And and the thing about Dickinson, he's not a great defender. He's really not. He's more of a scorer.
Yep.
And so.
All right, guys. Ball does have a 15-point lead. Minutes and 30-some seconds left in the game, it looks like, in the second half. I just thought I'd give you guys an update on that.
Still an ugly.
Yeah. We kind of started the show off having a little laughing. Before
You're breaking up
the air.
I
appreciate everybody being with us.
I couldn't hear you.
That's being with us. We're going to go home for the next times. So, all right. I hope you guys have a good night, and we will see you on Friday.
Yep.
For game day.
Yep. Have a good one.
Can I please have your attention? It's all a commotion around here.
What are you talking about?
Let them yap at you.
It's actually very exciting.